smile. No. There you go.
Wait, trying to smile.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you all today. Yes, this is my last show of the day. I've been going since 8 o'clock this morning. Can you believe it? But I've had some wonderful, wonderful conversations with you, and I'm so glad that you all have stuck with me all day. And this is part two of a conversation that was inspired by a story that I'd read, but I knew it had resonated very deeply when Dr. Sonia Whitaker um, said, I need you, we need to talk about this. Yes, we've been talking about the school to prison pipeline, as we've been talking about how to educate our incarcerated children, right? This kind of fits right into that. It fits right into that. Our children are routed to prison or to jail, uh, the less educationally skilled they are. Let me put it that way. If they don't know how to read, or if they're having trouble reading, you know this, Dr. LaShawn Latrice, you know this, Tio Hardiman, they're more likely to get into trouble. They're acting out. I mean, in fact, the name of your book, Is There Anybody Who Can Teach Me How to Read? Which came from a student who exclaimed to you in frustration, having been in trouble in school. I mean, it's like, I'm not crazy. Can anybody here teach me to read? I can't read. Yeah. I'm sitting here in class with you every day, and no one has done anything about the fact that I can't read. So, we got to talk about this, because now we were all horrified when we found out that there were judges in Pennsylvania, at least two, who funneled more than 1,500 children to private detention centers. As the corporate media put it, juveniles to private detention centers. These two judges sent hundreds of kids to jail for kickbacks. They were paid millions of dollars. Let's put it where it is. So I want to know what you think about that, everybody. I know we talked about this a little earlier, but I wanted to resonate with you, because as President Biden is pardoning people, some people get pardoned, some people get excused. I think we need to know the difference. A pardon is when you are genuinely sorry, you know you did wrong, but this was a system, because these kids did not matter. And we need to deal with that. Some people are excused. Some people are getting a pardon. And we've got thousands of people in jail after the 94 crime bill was passed that the president crafted. He was at the center of that. A bill that removed access to Pell Grants. Access to Pell Grants that our incarcerated citizens had access to since the 60s. At the height of the civil rights marches with Dr. King, the civil rights movement never ended. But out of that period where you got the Voting Rights Act and Fair Housing and Civil Rights Act and all of that, you also got access, prisoners got access to Pell Grants so they could get degrees while they were in prison. Well, the crime bill removed that. It removed that. And we see that the president has a son who has struggled, and he pardoned him in an unprecedented pardon that covered 10 years. No one would fault him for trying to take care of his child. Certainly I don't have any children, but you don't want anyone you love, I know, to be prey to your enemies. But while on others thou art calling, do not pass these thousands of people you imprisoned by, because the law that you crafted would have put your son under the jail. But he was given space. What about these children? What about these children? And so Mr. Conahan and Mr. Chair Varela, they're allowed to walk on and get pardoned. And now the White House is saying, well, the staff didn't look over their records carefully. No, 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 stop. Just stop with the falsehoods. You knew exactly what you were doing. You
Mhm.
knew exactly what you were doing because you know I didn't see you trying to commute any of these folks' sentences, and you all need to stop accepting this. I mean, so let's talk about this, Dr. Sonia Whitaker.
One of the things that I find most interesting
Hmm.
is Judge Conahan at his sentencing said, and I quote, "The system is not corrupt. I was corrupt. I am corrupt." So
Mhm.
he admitted exactly what he had done, which makes it most interesting to me that he would even accept a pardon, recognizing what he's done. The other thing that I want to add is, in addition to being moved and having a life changing experience as a professional by having a student who, on my watch, essentially as school principal in the northwest suburbs of Illinois at the time, on my watch, on our watch, he was dying to matter. And as far as I am concerned, much like many of the students with the same circumstances, he had made up in his mind that he was going to be good at being good, or he was going to be good at being bad, but he
Hmm.
was going to be good at something. And so, with that being said, as I began to continuously look at data, not just in the individual areas in which I was leading, but across the nation, even though Black students have the potential to excel academically, Black students far too often, not always, but far too often, are not receiving the same level of academic experiences and resource. And also, the student achievement data is lower than their peers. And so, kind of walking you through how do I get to this point. And I literally woke up one day, even before I learned of this pardon, and said, if the children are not making it, Black children in particular, brown children, and children experiencing the impact of poverty, which include white children, if they're not making it in our traditional public school settings, the research is showing that they're going to the juvenile detention centers. So I want to say to Santita and everybody within the sound of my voice, with all due sincerity, I believe that going and advocating for them right now, those that are in the juvenile detention center, we're their last hope. We've
Hmm.
got to get to them before they become men and women. Joe Biden pardoned men and women, not little girls and boys that think that we have forgotten about them. And so I would like to see him extend the same grace, the same compassion, and the same mercy to the students and the children in the juvenile detention centers as he has extended to someone that would actually admit that the system is not corrupt. I am corrupt.
Well, I mean, because no one is even talking about giving pardons or commuting the sentences of the children.
Correct.
I've not heard that discussed at all. I mean, what does it do to a child to be put in a private detention facility into jail? What I mean, in your experience as a teacher, as a principal, as a deputy superintendent of schools, as a superintendent of schools, you I mean
Yeah.
you've seen it from every level. What
Hmm.
does it do to a child? I mean, are they the same when they come out of prison or come out of jail?
Well, the first problem that we have is the research is showing that far too many of them never come out. And if they come out, when they come out, they're not receiving the supports that they need to make it. And so they do go from the school to prison pipeline. So they end up being devastated. The other thing that I have learned is that
Hmm.
the way that students experience any form of schooling in the juvenile detentions vary from state to state. So we don't even have a common level of expectation across our nation for what should happen when students are in juvenile detention centers relevant to their academic experiences. And the other thing that people aren't talking about is, during COVID, there were plenty of adults that left the prison system because they didn't want the spread of COVID. So if they had quote unquote minor offenses, they were allowed to leave the center, some with badges on their bracelets and the like, bracelets on their ankle and the like, but they were allowed to leave. What people aren't talking about is there were students across our nation, children that had been in juvenile detention centers for as long as 3 to 5 years, which means they had no connection to anybody's school. They left the juvenile detention center and then went home, connected with their schools online. So now they're doing workbooks and work packets and getting instruction online that is disconnected from any academic experience that they had while they were in the juvenile detention center, which is another hidden problem that needs to be addressed because 2 to 3 years from now, they're still feeling the effects of that. That's
You know,
heavy.
well, it is, and no social interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Because that to me, that's a very real part of school. That's what was so damaging about these lockdowns with COVID. And I have to tell you, I mean, I went straight through public school, but my nieces and nephews did not.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look, I see they went, their schooling was not interrupted during COVID, Dr. Latrice. They kept going to school. And one of my nieces was in boarding school. She was there until May. Then she came home and did the last month remotely. But she didn't skip a beat. She's about to come out of Brown University up in Rhode Island. And I said, this just the way, and even these affluent suburbs, they kept their schools open. This was so uneven. It was so uneven. But what do you think of this scenario in which, I mean, the judge did say, look, don't get upset with the system. Be upset with me because I'm the one who's corrupt. But the kids for cash scenario lets you know just how corruptible and quite frankly how rotten the system is because what we're doing to our children. I mean, because we have compassion for for white children, whatever their economic status. But quite frankly, the poorer you are, the tighter it is on you, even as a white person. Now, that's the reality. More and more, we're beginning to see the nature of classism. Racism is a form of classism, not the reverse. And everybody eventually gets hit. We just get hit first, T.O., and we get hit hardest, but eventually it hits everybody.
Yeah.
The drugs that they dropped on us in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, well, then they dropped fentanyl on poor white people. And they killed them. So, Dr. Latrice, what do you make of this kids for cash scenario?
Absolutely despicable. I remember this case because I was following it because of a documentary I watched where they talked very extensively about it, and I could not believe that children had been impacted on this level. But the nerve of Biden's administration to have the audacity to pardon someone who has caused the trauma on this level to children, because once you put a child behind bars, you can't undo that. There is no way possible you can remove all of that, all of the baggage that they pick up, because people have to understand when they go behind bars, there's another level of punishment that comes with that. The people who are working there, some of them face major issues of being institutionalized. So they subject these kids to, horrific acts, all kinds of punishments, like almost as if they are going through the same process all over again. And they ought to be ashamed of themselves when you think about a kid being put in jail for some of the reasons. And I watched a lot of the stories. I saw a lot of the parents. I could not believe it. But to hear that this judge was pardoned, only thing I can think of is he's got to be a friend of somebody in the administration. There's no way in the world that this guy should be able to walk away unscathed, almost as if, you know, he said, okay, I know I did wrong, but this is these effects on these children will go on just for decades. It's no way to undo any of this type of behavior. So I think that that this is a slap in the face to people like us who have stood 10 toes down, standing against this whole cycle of incarceration, this cycle of mass incarceration, and how it has torn up communities and torn families up. Mm-hmm. Just imagine, we see adults done wrong in the criminal justice system on a daily basis. Now they're starting with children. So you're in a way excusing the behavior of this judge, which already puts the light on the fact that we know that these situations have existed in other respects. So it's horrible.
I mean, it is horrible. And you know, it speaks, well, you know what, it exposes the system. You know, it doesn't, it's not telling us anything new, Dr. Whitaker. It's exposing something. T.O. Hardeman, your book.
You're Interrupting Gun Violence, the Public Health Approach. You can find it on Amazon.
Well, I think jailing these kids was violent.
Yeah, for sure.
Institutional violence. What do you make of this cash for kids scenario?
Well, the way I look at it, there should be some type of follow-up with the 2,300 young kids that he actually received cash to send them to prison. That's the DOJ should set up some type of formal system to just do some. See, let's find out where those kids are now. That's what needs to happen, because if he's got a pardon, he got a second chance. Some of the kids probably never got a second chance. Some of them probably went from the juvenile detention centers right to the penitentiary. Some of them probably been murdered in the penitentiary, lost their mind, mental issues, you name it. And we're not just talking about the kids. What about their families? The follow up with their families. We've had, it's so much evidence that the system is corrupt in a lot of cases. Wrongful convictions. Now he received $2.8 million him and his partner, whatever, as it relates to selling kids off. Now that happened in 2011, I believe it was, right? So this is the reality here. Imagine during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when we know for a fact that we had so many discrepancies and so many imbalances when it comes down to criminal justice, the system itself. So, let's go back just for a moment. Even in Chicago, 100 years ago, we know that a lot of members of the Ku Klux Klans, they took off their white costumes and they became state's attorneys, police officers, and, prosecutors and all that kind of stuff. So this fits right in. He was just one of the judges that got caught. Imagine all the other judges, because, the prison industrial complex is alive and kicking. We represent 14% of the population in the United States, but in some states, we represent 46% of the prison population. And I'm sure some of them guys, some of the young people in the state of Pennsylvania that he locked up when they were younger are part of the criminal justice system right today. So how many stories have we heard? Guys are 50, 60 years old, or maybe 45 or 50, and they were wrongfully in prison, and now they're out. They have to tell their story, but it's hard to rebuild yourself after you've been psychologically harmed. Once they shut that steel door on you, imagine they said it's factual that one of the kids was 8 years old. Come on now. How could you, it's in the paperwork. It's 8 years old, was sent to a juvenile detention center. That 8-year-old definitely needed some high level help, but not to be locked up. All righty. So that's my take on it. I do a lot of work down in some of the prisons when I go speak in some of the penitentiaries across the United States. And I volunteer in the Cook County Jail every Friday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And there's a mental health crisis going on in them county jail systems and the penitentiary.
Well, what's that look like? What does their mental health crisis look like?
Well, a lot of young guys, they just have those issues, psychological issues. Some of it's mild, some of the mental health issues are more severe. Then it turns into people become psychotic, sociopathic behavior. Then a lot of them when you lock people down, I appreciate Dr. Latrice being on there, because we all fought to close down Tam's prison here in Illinois, the Supermax, because it's inhumane behavior. When you put somebody in solitary confinement for year after year after year, it begins to take a toll on them. When I was down in Menard Prison working with some state legislators, while we were there doing a tour of the prison, there was somebody came on a loudspeaker and said, you know what, it's medicine time. And about 200 to 300 prisoners there had formed a line to go get their mental health medication, right? And Sheriff Tom Dart already mentioned that 30% of the prison population in Cook County Jail, they have mental illness. That's how it looks. It's right up in your face. These are facts I'm putting out here. People can look it up. So mental illness is definitely taken. You're talking about 30% now. Those have been, for the people that may have been diagnosed. It might even be higher because it's inhumane to just lock people away. That's why I speak about the failed war on drugs all the time, because something needs to give. And I believe the United States government should actually take a look at pardoning a lot of these guys that were locked up because it was the United, not my fault, but it was the United States fault for losing the war on drugs, because it's devastated communities and families. Now you got a judge that took that oath to, be balanced. He was not balanced. You know what I mean? It's like, and what about the collateral damage? I'm talking about collateral damage to young people and their families, Santita.
Well, and you've got a president who, Dr. Whitaker, Dr. Latrice, T.O. Hardeman, he knows this firsthand.
Exactly.
And see, because part of his narrative is he's known pain. He's empathetic, not just sympathetic, right? I need to see some evidence of that, because that's not what I'm seeing. I didn't see that in the crafting of the crime bill, because it wasn't rehabilitative. He has not mentioned the crime bill at all since he's been here. I mean, and we've let him get away with it. Some of that's on us. Some of that's on us.
We didn't let him get away with it.
No.
Didn't.
Well, you did, but as a generally speaking.
I'm like, we did it.
Yeah, but generally speaking, and quite frankly, this is when you see the class divide, quite frankly, Dr. Whitaker, in our community. Because the higher we climb, the less we are inclined to mention these issues. Because we don't want to deal with the poor either now.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to live my life, do my thing, and that's it. I'm not mad at you, because that is a human tendency. But the thing is, you can't leave people behind. You don't have to live there. I mean, no, Walter Jacobson used to take off. That's how he made his bones, taking off on Reverend. Anyone who grew up in Chicago remembers that. And something they were talking about, the house we were in, something, and it was a nice home. And it was something that it was actually, they thought he was looking for another home, which really bothered him. Walter Jacobson, that is. They were not, we were at a picnic, and somebody said, "You've got to see this fabulous house." And my mother was like, "Oh, I'd love to see it." She loves antiques. So we just went in, because this realtor was selling it. Oh my gosh. And there was this disruption about it. He said, "Look, let me tell you something, everybody. I went to school. I grew up poor. I don't want to be poor again, ever. I've dedicated my life to moving you out of poverty and lifting the ceiling off it, creating a floor beneath which you should not fall. I don't want you to be poor, but I'm not going to join you in poverty. I didn't make you that promise. I said, I'm going to try and pull you out of it myself." Okay? But there's something that's missing here, because he will be in office until January 20th. We should be making this appeal right now. What about these kids? Are you going to pardon them?
Exactly.
I mean, Dr. Whitaker, T.O., Dr.
Yeah.
Latrice, they need to be pardoned. What about, have you looked at the cases? Y'all ain't got nothing but time, space, and opportunity. Are you going to look at these cases, the people who were arrested because they had some crack? Really? So did your son. And there are pictures of him doing it. Clearly, he's got issues. And I hope he gets some attention for them. No one descends. You descend into crack use. When you start using those drugs, there's something that's missing, and he needs help. But so does everybody else who falls into that. I'm just saying the compassion that you give to him, give it to everybody else.
That's all we're saying, Santita. Is it makes sense to everybody, and I believe a lot of people are up in arms when it comes down to this decision that Joe Biden made with this judge, and it's crazy because I bring this up every now and then. Some people don't like it, but I have to speak on it, and it's positive to me. I would like to see them pardon Larry Hoover and Jeff Ford. I'm not saying it just because they come from Chicago. I'm saying they've done their time just the same. Why not take a look at giving them a pardon because of the failed war on drugs? You got Jeff Ford is locked up. Really, they say he tried to commit an act of terrorism, but he's more of a political prisoner. Larry Hoover, yeah, he did his damage in society without a doubt, being like one of the leaders of the gangs in Chicago. But it's been like he's like 70 something plus years old now. He's done some time. Maybe allow him to come home and try to get involved in restorative justice practices or something like that to repair his harm that he's done to society. So I wish that they would take a look at those guys as well, since you're going to pardon this judge also.
And Tio, I really like your recommendation. I hadn't considered that, to give them some place to start. Go straight to the children. They want to say this is too big, and nationally there are too many children in the juvenile system. How about we start the process before Biden gets out of office? I want to say it loud and clear, by connecting with the children and the families that were impacted by his corrupt activity.
There you go.
But the thing is, I'm saying we should make that appeal now.
Absolutely.
If you are going to not pardon, you excuse these judges. And then the White House gives me the response, well, we didn't really look at his record. That is a lie. Just stop with that.
Anybody that he put in jail, unless it was for a murder and the like.
And then you need to deal with that, because deal with all of it. And I'm with you. Murder, that's an exception. That having been said, if you fixed this, I can't trust the murder conviction, because that means that the rot is real deep. I don't know if, because the prosecutors are all on the same team, I don't know how this might have been fixed.
I can tell some stories. With my
we can all tell some stories. All you have to do is look at Jussie Smollett.
That's right.
They turned off the cameras in the courtroom. The judge tried to physically assault his counsel. This man tried to physically assault this woman who was his lawyer. No one talks about that.
Wow.
I mean, they'll like physically go after her. What? I mean, I'm just saying there's some questions that we need to be asking. And Dr. Whitaker, as we're looking at this school to prison pipeline, as we're looking at our children who are when they should not be put in detention in school, when you need to sit down with the baby, what is going on with you? And then you find out all kinds of things. We're putting our children are at least 3 to 4 times more likely to be suspended or expelled. And actually quite higher depending upon which study you watch. And I mean, wait a minute. Our children are being routed to prison. They are being put in handcuffs at 5 years of age. They're being put in the backs of police cars.
Right.
And what their parents are also saying is that when they go to the juvenile detention center, there's no communication far too often to them about their child's day-to-day experiences, not even about a curriculum, be it online or in person. In fact, studies show that recently parents from at least 14 states said that when their children went to the center, they had no idea what they were going to be learning. And many of their children had been there for years. So no grades, no progress reports. we're required in the traditional public school setting. Most school districts around our country have what is referred to as curriculum nights in September, where parents come in, or now online in some cases, where we are clear and we articulate to parents what their children are expected to know and be able to do as they matriculate from one grade level to the next. We introduce them to the curriculum. We let them touch the curriculum. We let them look at the curriculum. We let them ask questions about the curriculum. Your children go to juvenile detention, you know nothing.
Tio, what did Tio, LaShawn, everybody, I mean, Dr. Whitaker, I mean, as we are, we've been active in Push Excel, and we ought to be. I think that has to be part of the Push Excel program, because the piece that people miss with Reverend is that while he was going to high schools, he was also going to prisons and detention centers. That's how he met Greg Mathis and so many others.
Mm-hmm.
And he was known for that, because there's no child that should be left behind. He's the one who popularized that phrase. These people have taken it and they've done other things with it, but you don't leave anybody behind. So, I mean, as these judges have gotten these pardons, and people who were victimized by him, like I said, you need to look at all of the cases that they oversaw, because you don't know what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
Including the most violent of offenses. You don't know, because these kids were throwaway kids. That's why they were able to do that to them. When you have parents and a community out there raising Cain, this does not happen to your children. That's why you have to get involved in organizations, everybody. When you go alone, you are most vulnerable. Haven't you noticed that the stars who die under mysterious circumstances really don't have any families? They die alone. See, it's hard to jam up Michael too much, because the monkey wrench Michael threw at them is that he left heirs. He wasn't supposed to do that. Okay? Prince didn't leave any children. So you're gettable when you're by yourself. If you take your family member to the hospital, you better sit up there with them. Because if people don't see your family and loved ones with you, they think that no one cares about you and you are vulnerable. But when they see people sitting up with you, they treat you differently. When our children hit a wall, even if it's not your birth child, you need to step in there and say, what's going on with them? Well, are you the mom? No, but that's my child. What is going on? We've got to do that. And while Biden is still in office for another month, you pardon them. Okay, good. That was your right. What about all these people he convicted? Wipe their records clean too. And while you're at it, look at the 94 crime bill. So there's a whole lot, because you got a whole lot that we have seen with Hunter and everybody else. Since you are empathetic and you know what people go through.
Well, it's time for him to make it right for the country here today before he leaves office. For example, the prison industrial complex is one of the major employers for people here in Illinois. There used to be 38 penitentiaries in Illinois. Now the number's down to about 26. Now, the reality, a lot of those prisons are downstate. They employ a lot of people in them southern towns. If you take a look at across the United States, the same thing happens. So the reality is that since the war on let me just put these numbers out there. With this crack cocaine addiction thing going on and selling crack, that has kind of fallen off a little bit over the years. So now they have to come up with a new reason and purpose on how to lock people up. This judge being convicted of selling kids shows you how crime pays, in other words. So a lot of times you talk about the school to prison pipeline. There was some studies done that would dictate the fact that when these kids drop out in third grade, they know they're going right to prison. A lot of people are illiterate in prison. They never had any formal education. So they would never build a penitentiary unless they knew, based on the numbers from inner cities, that they would fill the prisons up. So that's why that judge was part of that particular scheme. But there's other judges and a lot of people involved in those type of schemes to send people to prison all the time. I want people to know also about 98% of all the people that are fighting a criminal case within any jurisdiction, they normally take a plea deal. People don't know that. That's a high number. They normally take a plea deal. It's designed that way. A lot of people do not have the funds to kind of fight the case and all that kind of stuff. So they'll take the years. Case in point, this guy, Young Thug out of Atlanta, he was locked up for a while, but two guys never accepted the plea. They actually beat the case. He took a plea deal. He's on 20 years probation now. 20 years probation, and he took a plea deal. So that's just a case, a high profile case, but that's what's going on. Crime pays, locking people up. It's a number involved in that all the way back to the chain gangs up until today. And, so it's a bigger story behind the judge. And that's something we got to take a look at as well as leaders out there, community educators, thought provoke, people that thought leaders. We need to take a strong look at those numbers because it takes place all over the place. When we closed TAMS down, TAMS was built for the toughest gang leaders and toughest criminals. But come on, man, it's like you don't even see the toughest guys. This is based on numbers, everybody. It's only 5% of the people involved in the world of criminality that are the toughest and the guys that commit most of the heinous crimes. The other percentage is kind of here or there. You got another percentage that commit psychopaths, sociopaths. Then you got the individuals that are just like they're like marginal type of individuals that are locked up for non-violent crimes. In other words, let me put more of a context to it. More non-violent people locked up. It's a very small percentage of the violent people locked up compared to a high percentage of non-violent people locked up for the drug trade. So the drug trade played a dual purpose. Make sure families are addicted to drugs, number one, destroying communities, and number two, filling up the prisons because of the laws, they get convicted. That's what happens. Most black guys that sell dope, they have to go to somebody that's a non-black person to get the dope and bring it into their community to poison their people, period. They get the drugs from somebody from some other country somewhere.
Well, okay. Also, remember, they build these prisons in these thinly populated areas so that they can repopulate them and get representatives.
There you go.
On the local, state, and federal levels. When you have enough prisoners in a facility, that can constitute a district, even a congressional district.
There you go. Yes.
Think about it.
Yeah.
That's how this works. That's why they're downstate. You made a brilliant point. They put them in these places because it's farmland. But if you put a few thousand people here, a few thousand people there, that's what's up.
Yeah.
You end up with a congressional district.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay? Because then you got to have people who work in the prison.
Right.
And lottie-dottie-dottie and everybody. And we have to start looking at that and understanding the game and stop falling into it. We also, I will say this, we must get a hold of our communities.
Yep.
You already know that these people are coming for you. We have got to get a hold of our children so that they can be well behaved. We're the ones that are going to have to educate them, Dr. Whitaker.
I agree.
Dr. Carter G. Woodson told you in The Miseducation of the Negro that you do not hand your children, your vulnerable children, over to the opposition to educate them. See, it's always been confusing to me when we say, oh my goodness, they're taking Black history out of the schools. And I'm like, okay, good. So we need to teach our kids because you know what? Karen doesn't understand my history. See, Karen didn't have a grandmama like I did. When my mother's mother died, and she was a very dark-skinned woman who looked, when my old cab driver, Mr. Olumula, may he rest in peace, he was Nigerian. When he met my mother's mother, he said, oh, she's Nigerian. Oh, 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 oh. He was so excited. My father's mother was way on the other end of the spectrum. They gave me two very, very important encounters I had with them. When my mother's mother died, my mother didn't want to have a funeral. I knew she was bereft, but she and her sister, they just didn't want to do that. Plus, he had a brother who was dying. He died a week after my grandmother passed. And he said, and my father said, no, this is for everybody else, baby. We gotta, and back and forth, and we finally had the funeral. Okay. But my mother said, but she wants we gotta close the casket. And my father said, no, because you gotta see her for the last time. She said, my mother didn't want anyone to ever, oh my gosh, look down on her again. That's her experience. Then my father's mother, we got Roots too early because we knew the producers and all that. And I was so excited. We got like 3 or 4 episodes in advance. And I got out to California with my grandmother. And I was so excited. And I said, oh, I saw Roots, but I couldn't get it out. She said, do not ever mention Roots to me ever. Do you know why we look as we do? Do you think I want to be reminded of that? If you read the book At the Dark End of the Street, that is what Rosa Parks used to say. And my grandmother was in that family. She said, oh no. Rosa Parks said, every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the abuse of this white man. Oh no, I have to keep fighting. That's my father's legacy. So I got those 2 things coming at me. Right? We're going to have to get a grip on our own communities, T.O. Dr. Whitaker, Dr. Latrice, we've got to lovingly chastise our children. Because see, if they're not well behaved, my parents would always want to know, well, what did you do? Even though it might have sounded like there was some mess in the game and they were messing with us. First, they wanted to make sure that we were not out of line, which is why when I was read the Riot Act in my Harvard interview, I was defenseless because it could not be reported that you know what the old folks used to say, you couldn't say that I sassed an adult. You couldn't do that. I just had to take the hit for an hour and 45 minutes. I just had to take it and then let my parents fight that back because you don't sass adults. And my father said, you've inherited my friends and my enemies. You haven't earned either of them. But my enemies, if our children have good manners, that's one less thing they can get them on. We got to help our children. We got to stop letting our children grow up in the wild. Got to stop it. That's an American dilemma right now, by the way, if you notice it. But it gets our children killed. Mm-hmm. And if we don't raise some standards for them, all is lost. We've gotten the world, but we've lost our souls. That's got to stop.
For sure. It's
got to stop. And I'm just saying, I'm a fight for my children because I'm a fight for these kids. I don't care what color they are. These judges are awful. What they did was horrible. But I gotta get my children back into the space where they avoided trouble. There's got to be a payoff, Dr. Latrice. We can't continue with this. We can't. Because we don't have that kind of space. We don't. We got to take charge of our own schools. We've got to demand that we have the best teachers. We've got to demand that teachers get paid. And if you're going to go to school and you go to school on government loans, the loans need to be forgiven if you're going to be in, because I think a teacher is in a service industry. They're defending our country just like the military are defending our country. I feel that way about garbage workers. Let them go on strike. You'll see how necessary they are. So,
Santita, here in Cook County, to show you how crime pays, Cook County Jail would normally on any given year have about 10,000 inmates, so detainees over there. So now what they're doing, they're sending detainees to other county jails across the state of Illinois to kind of like lessen their population, but to help increase the population in some of these other counties, because there's not as many detainees as it used to be some years ago. And I attribute that to this, the drug trade is not as lucrative as it used to be during the crack era. And now that marijuana is legal, a lot of things are falling off a little bit when it comes. So these are based on numbers. I'm not basing it just talking about it. So what happens, fentanyl is on the rise. Don't get me wrong, people making money off fentanyl. That's the more popular drug right now. But the prison populations are decreasing. There was 52,000 inmates in the state of Illinois at one time or another. Now it's down to about 38,000. And that number might be a little lower as of today. So we got to look at the real numbers out there and what's going on. There's been a shift. Guys are not being locked up like they used to be with all those drug conspiracy charges. A lot of people have gotten clean from smoking the crack cocaine. You don't have as many heroin addicts as you had back in the 70s, 80s, in the 90s. And crack cocaine was a big hit during the mid 80s up into the 90s, going in 2000, kind of fizzled off a little bit, right? So now there has to come, the people in power that are dictating these type of policies had to come up with another type of process, in other words, to lead people to them penitentiaries, right? Because the numbers are falling off. And that's another big story. And that comes with job loss as well. Job loss is taking place. So anybody at any time can look up these numbers and know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's something that we need to take in consideration throughout the United States. So back to President Biden, he has an opportunity to make it right. You know, pardon some of them people that were locked, pardon all the people that were locked up, and a commission, put it like this, put an order out to DOJ and commission a research project to find them people. They know the names of them people that were locked up. They know their names. Them young guys are probably 30 years old now, maybe 25, 28. You know, find them, see what we can do to help them. They need what you might say some reparations directly to that population.
They
that
need a bridge.
That's what I'm talking about. Get them a bridge.
Wait a minute. Go. Stay right there, Dr. Whitaker, because you're like, wait a minute. Because they get, because I mean, I don't mean just just college. They might have they might their intelligence might be in the vocational space, more of that. Okay. I mean, wherever, because look, most, you know, I mean, everybody has their strength. That's why eliminating, removing vocational education has been a huge mistake. It has killed us. I remember first time I took algebra, I was at Dunbar High School. It was like 2 or 3 blocks from my grammar school. And they let about 6 or 7 of us go there as 8th graders. And they had the students had built a house and it was in the middle of Dunbar. Do you know how exciting it was to know that the students that, you know, 14, 15, and 16 and 17-year-olds had built a house? And I was like, can we go in there and see it? And one day we went back. I went back with one of my parents and we went into the house. It was a house that, I mean, the water worked, bathroom, bedrooms, living rooms, lights, Do you know how exciting that was? I was like, and students did this? Sonia, it's not enough that, you know, it's just like letting people go from slavery. LBJ knew that. He said, no, you can't just release these people out here. You got to help them to become citizens. So let's ask for the pardons and the commutations, but we need to ask for something in addition to that. Dr.
And I would say in addition to that, for the younger children that are in the juvenile detention centers today, that are not a part of the group of children that were impacted by his corrupt activity, I think that we need to develop clearer standards for what should happen when it is time for them to go back to their schools and school districts. Similar expectations, and an example of that would be that there would be a team from the school that would partner with the officials in the juvenile detention centers. I'm thinking like a team of as many as 5 or 3 to 5 on each side that would be a part of building the plan for each and every student so that they can make their way back into the school system and be effective. That would be one example.
Dr. LaShawn Latrice, I would think that even if these kids were locked up for a day, that there needs to be a real program to help them to examine where they are mentally and to the mental fitness, right?
Yes,
And to
absolutely. There is no way that you can put a kid behind any walls, any sort of jail cell walls, scare straight programs, any of those things. I don't care if it's for a day. I don't care if it's for 6 hours. That is trauma that's impacted on top of trauma because you have a situation where a kid probably knows they haven't done anything wrong. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, let's look at the aspect of they're wondering, how did this happen? How is this possible? I would be wondering that as a kid. How am I in a jail cell? Um, then the last part of it is when you look at the dynamics of how this judge made money off of sending kids to prison, and I think it was another judge involved,
it was
but
two of them. They
Two
when
of them.
got two
you
parts.
look at this entire process, what it shows is that not only were they skimming and scamming with their processes as abusing their authority, but there is another aspect that prisons don't function without making money off of the people that come in. So if you're talking about children being put into an institution, what is the premise that was even possible from the beginning? So secondly, how many people are incarcerated based on a monetary gain from a corporation and individual? This is why I went back for my doctorate. I wanted to study the prison for profit scheme. That's what we call it, a prison for profit scheme. And it's connected directly to the cycle of mass incarceration and the criminal justice system. In a lot of my papers, I call it the criminal injustice system. But what I mean by that is, let's compare apples to oranges. You have Larry Hoover, Jeff Ford, who they say they've done all these horrific crimes, but they spent 23 hours in a cell every day and was only allowed 1 hour out in the most horrific conditions. But a person that sends kids to jail and collects millions off of it can go live at a camp, or they can go sit free in a jail cell, not segregated, not in a cell for 23 hours. That solitary confinement, that mental, the entire process of it, it reeks of two sets of laws for Black people, for white people, for minorities, for people who have money, who they may call affluent people. They don't have to deal with the type of things that we have to deal with. And when you talk about these prisons being built in communities where they're trying to build up the congressional offices and things like that, we're not even talking about the generational jobs that they're lining it up. You have people that work in prisons, their grandfather, father, daughter, mother, everybody in the community, they make money off of. So it's like so many different streams of income. And then when you think about the slave labor on the inside of the prison, that's even worse. So, kids being incarcerated, I just couldn't even understand how there was even the notion of allowing this judge to be pardoned. That
Both of
is
two of
both judges. And see,
yeah.
that's just a slap in the face on every level. When I think about my own personal kids and what could happen if something like this would have penetrated, it's just like with us, I know you all probably share the same sentiments. We probably would have banded together and tried to find out how can we get this exposed, because even though it was happening in Pennsylvania, it was parents that was trying to seek some sort of assistance, but they were receiving doors closed in their face. You know why? Because people didn't want to buck up against the system. Because we're told when we get ready to step on toes, you got to be careful when you get ready to say this or that, because, they may come at you. Well, like you said earlier, Santita, what can you do? What can you do to me? It's so many things that have been done to us over time that we're conditioned to just say, okay, whatever comes with this, we got to fight this. But I just think now is the time that we hold these people, these systems, these structures accountable. We do not let them get away with it. And just like Tio said, yeah, there's a decrease in the prison population, but the young folks are going to jail in alarming numbers. Women are going to jail in alarming numbers.
Mhm.
It is just the reverse of what was happening before. Now they're after the young people. They're after, it's like placing a trailer full of guns in the community and leave it open. And
Well,
say,
it's like
whoever
Gaza.
touches
Gaza, they're going after the women and the
you
children.
know, I'm just saying it's been happening. It's been happening in our communities for the longest. We're going to park these trains. We're going to bait these people over here. We're going to try to place some cases on them. People do not understand when it comes to our communities, we are put up against so many other things that it is such an unfair that the playing field is never going to be level, because we have to not be afraid to speak up when things are being done that are just unjust and it makes no sense at all. And during the election that just took place, we talked about that crime bill, and we talked about how Joe Biden and his administration was not supposed to be trusted because they wanted to hide that whole conversation. That's why nobody talked about prison reform. Nobody talked about mass incarceration. None of those things seemed important, not even important enough to let people know, hey, you're a voice in this election. So instead, what happens? Now we roll over to this part. Now Biden's going to show, okay, I'm being liberal right now because I did this for my son. So now I got to go randomly select people and pardon them. Okay, this doesn't make sense at all.
No, it does make sense. The thing is, you just don't like the sense that it makes.
Right.
So, oh no, it's okay. But that is why you need to join the organizations, everybody. You cannot afford to float out here by yourself, because if you are by yourself, what did they say in The Color Purple? Said, if you hadn't been so unkind to Miss Seeley and left her out here by herself, the white folks never would have got her. And it's not just white people, because I have a lot of white people listening to this show. I'm not indicting all white people, and I'm not absolving all black people or anybody, because human beings are who we are. We all have the same stuff in us. Yeah, we do. We do. We can all be compassionate. We can all be wicked. We can all be noble. We can all be base. That's just what people, that's who we are as human beings. But now we need to be noble. Now we need to make a decision about creating the beloved community, because that's really what it ought to be. And we've got to get everybody, black, white, brown, yellow, red, you've got to get control of these children. You raise them. Stop being afraid of these kids and value life. Because part of the problem that we have right now, Tio Hardiman and Dr. LaShawn Latrice and Dr. Sonia Whitaker, is that they don't value life, and because they don't feel that their lives are valued.
And so I think, Santita, as we prepare for Saturday at the Rainbow Push Coalition, where we will address this topic amongst several others, my greatest hope that what will come out of that is also, if there is such a thing as a system that does it right, to create models, or to know where the models exist across our country, where there are programming options being made available for our students. From an academic, imagine this, from an athletic perspective, in terms of our students having access to programming focused on the arts in prison. And then what I'm looking at Dr. LaShawn and thinking about, and now and learning about her study at the prison level with adults, but I'm wondering, what is an ideal model of support as it relates to addressing the mental health of the young adults in the prison setting? And so those of us who I'll say have the microphone and the ability to draw the attention to this topic of discussion at the local, state, and national levels, I'm looking forward to, guests that I'll have on, guests that I'm seeking out, that can give us enough information to be clear about what we're advocating for, and equally important, the outcomes that we want to see as a result of our advocacy.
Well, that's why I wanted you to be here today as we close everything out. Join us at Rainbow Push on Saturday. We're giving away groceries. We're doing health screenings.
Mhm.
People are getting, if you need your vaccines, you can get those.
The
All of
breakfast
that.
at 9 a.m.
That's right. And if you have questions about different medicines, you're allowed to ask them. No one's forcing you to do anything. No one's forcing you to do anything. But we're going to reach out, Dr. Whitaker. We need to reach out to people, Commissioner Lowry, and people in the county health system, so that folks can know, even if they are uninsured or underinsured, that they have a system that they can go into, so that they can find out how healthy they are and get some help.
Yeah.
Really. And so we got a lot of work to do. But everybody, if you want to go somewhere fast, go by yourself. But if you want to go far, you go with everybody else. Think about that, everybody.
That's correct.
I will
Yes.
see ya.
Right.
Dr.
Appreciate you.
Whitaker, T.O. Hardeman, your book?
Yeah, Interrupting Gun Violence, the Public Health Approach. And I'll always remember to smile, Santita.
Too handsome not to.
I was
Dr.
putting that-
LaShawn Latrice, you got to do that. Say it.
Yeah,
Oh, he's smiling. What's happening?
Right.
Santita
Yes,
Jacksonville,
indeed.
AM 950 Radio. God bless you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you so much.